Greetings, book lovers everywhere, and welcome to E-Train Talks. I'm E-Train, and I am so excited for this interview. I've had a lot of authors that I've had the chance to talk to, but this one, right here, he's been on my bucket list for a while, ever since I read his fantastic graphic novels, and even watched the adaptation of his book series. Can you guess who I'm talking about? Well, I have the extraordinary chance to interview an award-winning writer whose imagination knows no bounds, and whose books take us away in fantastical and imaginative, fun-filled middle-grade adventures. He's an absolute legend in the book world, and long story short, this is Max Brallier. Max is the #1 New York Times, USA Today, and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, more than 50 books. But the one that pretty much everyone knows him for is The Last Kids on Earth. And it has 10 million copies in print. But along with that, Max has done a lot of other cool things in his life. He even has books under a new pen name. He's written books for Scholastic and all kinds of different publishers. And now, without further delay, I'm so excited to introduce all of you to Max. Welcome and thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. So the main book that we're going to be talking about today is The Last Comics on Earth, Too Many Villains, which is the sequel. And the sequel always has to be bigger and better than the first book. And in my opinion, I think it really was. So before we really get into some deeper questions about the book, why don't you just tell us all what The Last Comics on Earth, Too Many Villains is about?
So, the last comics on Earth, like the first, this is the second book. It's a kind of like spin-off series from The Last Kids on Earth, where we took like the characters from Last Kids and sort of thought about like what if they were like writing their own graphic novels, their own comic books, and what would that look like? What would that be like? And so all the books in the last comic series, we're working on number 3 right now. It's something that the kids have created. It's like, okay, they sat down and Jack, June, Quentin, Dirk, made their own comic book, and they imagine themselves as superheroes, and they write and draw superhero adventures for themselves in this made-up world of apocalyptia they've created. And they fight bad guys, and there's lots of weird monsters and creatures, and it's like really kind of silly, zany, goofy, much more so than the main series. And so Too Many Villains is about they discover, like, they're sort of asking themselves, like, all like supervillains always have these big plans, these really big evil plans. Where do they come from? Because supervillains aren't that smart, but they have like these brilliant plans, but then they never work. And they discover there's like one character, one villain behind every evil plan ever, and they have to then sort of face off with that villain, Mister. Well, I don't want to spoil it.
And no spoilers, no spoilers. So, The Last Comics on Earth is really interesting because it kind of breaks the fourth wall in the sense that all your characters are writing their own story, and the words and the pictures that they draw and they create, they're onto our page. And so it's just such a cool and fun writing style, and it gives readers a sneak peek into what it's like to craft a story. So how did the idea come to you to sort of, I guess, have the characters write the story in a sense for you?
Yeah, it's sort of like you said, like where it's like the characters craft the story, right?
Yeah.
It was thinking about like, oh, like what would they create, and then also like when I'm writing, it's sort of like get giving the characters like my job. So it's like, okay, like I'm sitting here, I'm writing these books. I'm writing Last Kids on Earth, and I'm like, and that came like I became a writer because I spent all this time as a kid like writing stuff that I liked, and I would do it with my friends too. Like we'd write our own comic books, and we'd sit and we'd draw them together and stuff after school and during school and summer vacation. So I was like, wait, okay, what if we gave the characters the job that like I have? And then I teamed up with my friend Josh, Josh Pruitt, who was a writer on the Netflix series. And so I was like, okay, now what if we do this together, sort of just like we want the characters to do, and they'll make something, they'll write something, and like we'll put that voice into their mouths. So it's fun, like it's fun to think about, like not just to write like for kids like I've been doing, but to like sort of write like even more than usual, like as a kid
Yeah.
for kids, and like imagine like thinking about like the stuff that I would have made when I was as old as they are, and like doing like all like because it's a superhero story, it's so much fun to be like, my power would be this, my power would be this, and then like that's too strong, Jack. Like you can't, that's too many powers, and like no, like but it'd be cool. I want that, like all that stuff that like I would do like with my buddies when I was a kid, like doing that all again now, like through these characters.
Yeah, and there's humor, it's super fun, and I love the way you wrote it. And the illustrations also by Jay Cooper, they're just everything kind of comes together really perfectly, and I love the way it turned out. And I'm sure
Thank you.
everybody else is.
I hope so. I Jay is awesome. Like we got really, so I've known Jay for a long time, and but I never worked with him, but I knew him, and like I loved all his stuff. And then when we started to like think about this, I knew that like he'd be perfect to like draw like in the style of a kid, sort of, but like but like yeah, like in the style of a kid, and also like he takes every panel, every page is like so filled with like little jokes that like you don't see in the first read through, or little stuff in the background, like all these sort of little things that like when I go through and when I read the finished book, I'm like, wait a second, there's like a million more things in here than like I realized the first time through. He just has this like gift of being able to like just jam a page full of like jokes and little like details that you would miss, and like it's the best part of it. When doing the new book, Too Many Villains, when me and Josh were writing it, we were like, okay, this time we're just going to sort of like like create settings and situations where Jay can go nuts and just make whatever like he like just like really like run wild, because like that's like, sort of like get out of his way and let him be amazing.
Yeah. And this was really, really a wild book. And the next question is just it's kind of a general question, but I do think it's one that I've personally always been really like fascinated by. So there are just so many names. I guess yeah, there's so many names in the last comics on Earth, and every book really. Names are so they seem so easy to come up with, but they can also be really hard.
It's
So
hard.
you have everything you could think of. You have the Dastardly Duo plus one. That's the big group of supervillains. Not the one. Well, that's not really a spoiler, but kind of is. So it's my fault.
They no, that's not what they're the opening scene.
Yeah.
Uh, but then there's more. Yeah, then like
Yeah.
then kind of comes back around. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So how do you come up with the names that for all
it
of your characters?
it depends. Sometimes they'll just like come to me. Um, but I feel like more often than not, like I have to like really like sit down and like try hard to come up with good names now.
Mhm.
Like, there's a couple like I have like things where like for the main series, whenever I try to come up with a new bad guy name or like a monster creature, for some reason like I default to like the letter G, and I'm like I can't just keep doing G characters. Uh, and like also like in Last Kids, like Jack and June are like two. Like Jack's the main character, and June's one of the one of the four main characters. But they both have J names, and they both have four letters, which is like not great writing, and I should have realized that. Like it's gonna be, it's like it just like kind of complicates things. So like if I could go back and do it, I would have, I don't know, made given like one of them a slightly different name. Uh, but I spent a lot of time thinking about like what sounds like would be fun to say. Sometimes like names that look funny on the page are cool. Um, I'll poke around stuff online. There's like name generators you can go to for like I think it's like originally for like Dungeons and Dragons players where it's like I need like a new demon. And so like I'll play around with those, but I like to even then if it gives you a list of 100 names, like I like to like use as inspiration, but I don't like to just take them, even if it's
Yeah.
like for free, like for if it's for writers. 'Cause I still want to make it my own, even if it's if it's like a name generator thing. So like I'll look at that stuff. Sometimes I'll just like be like, okay, I haven't used R yet for the well that's Rezok. I haven't used B yet. No, it's Bartle. So like I haven't used C yet. See, that's the problem. I haven't used C yet, and then I'll like try to figure out like okay, what's the C name, and look at different stuff. But I want stuff that's like fun to say, and
Yeah.
especially with last comics as opposed to last kids, like sort of funny looking, and like the word itself like makes you is like some words like look different than other words. So yeah, like a lot of just sort of a lot of trial and error.
The Last Kids on Earth was adapted into a Netflix animated series, which, of course, as a lot of us know, it won an Emmy, which is a daytime Emmy, which is super duper awesome. So, I mean, Round of applause, everybody. Gotta give him some props. So, what was the process like turning the graphic novel into a TV series? And as the author of the book originally, how much say did you have?
It was the process was a process, but like good. Like I had a lot lucky. I had like a lot of say in it. It wasn't like I just sort of handed it off to somebody else.
Yeah,
Um, but I was sort of involved every step of the way. One of six writers in a writer's room. Um, so I was like, yeah, I was very involved, like in sort of the whole, like every step of the way. With we had a great showrunner, Scott Peterson, and awesome writers who are now friends of mine. Josh, I write. That's how I met Josh. So now we write less comics together. Uh, and so we looked at like the books and figured out like how do we sort of break these down, like what's happening here, like the plot into episodes, can be what stuff could we change, make bigger, make different in a way that, like, not just for the sake of changing it, but to make it more exciting on screen, or or to ramp up the tension and things like that. The biggest thing, like the biggest sort of um, change that was a positive, and then like also like a challenge, but in a good way, and gave me, like, helped me out sometimes, is that the books are all told from Jack's point of view. So like
yeah.
we only know what Jack knows. Like, we're limited to that. So we can't just cut away and then see like what the bad guys are doing and then cut back to Jack. Um, or we can't just see like what June and Quint are like up to, or what Dirk's doing without Jack like being there. So the TV show let us do that. So you can just cut around to different characters and stuff, because it's not all from Jack's point of view. Although like the beginning of the special that is like sort of the first book, that stays pretty limited to Jack for about the first half. So that was like a nice thing to be able to like jump around without having to explain like how come these kids keep like watching the bad guys do everything. uh and then like taking the monster characters and giving them sort of more personality, getting to spend more time with them, particularly Bartle. He got to be like a much sort of bigger character. And then some of that stuff would then influence the way that I was writing the books. I was doing it at the same time. So like I liked the way we were, like, Bartle was changing a little bit when we were writing him for this TV series. So I was like, oh, I like some of that stuff. I'll put some of that stuff into the book, and move that around a little bit. And then like Globlet from the TV series, like, cracked me up, the little pink rubbery character. My friend Haley, who was one of the writers, Haley Mancini was the writer on the show, and she would do the voice for Globlet. And when we were writing it, it cracked me up. And so she did the voice for the character in the show. And then like I loved that character so much that then I brought the character into the books. Like, that character didn't exist in the books until the show, and I was like, oh, this character's great, and now it's like my favorite character to write. So it was a really wonderful process, like, and it was a blast. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And I'm just curious. So, The Last Kiss on Earth, it's not necessarily a graphic novel with full panels
Right.
on each page, but it does have illustrations in it. So, do you think that that kind of made it a bit easier for it to be adapted into a TV series than maybe a story with no pictures or no illustrations would be?
Really good question. I never had that question before. I never really thought about it. That's a great question. Um, it's easier. It's probably easy. It might have been easier to first like sell it right to Netflix, so they can sort of like when there are illustrations that are inherently part of the story, they're able to sort of see it in a way that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Um, but at this, so yeah, that might have made it easier. Also, there were certain sequences and stuff where, in the script or talking with the animators, we'd be like, this one, I want to look just like it did in the book. There's a
Yeah.
couple of those sorts of, like, I love that scene, that image in the book. I love the way Doug drew it, and I want to just make it almost the same. But then at the same time, like I wanted the characters to look not exactly the same, but like be recognizable. Like you would sort of know that it wasn't like a totally different character design for the show. I don't want to change anything in the books, because the way that Doug created them and drew them is fantastic. But they
Mhm.
need to be a little bit different for the show, just because it's a whole different medium. So like we had something to fall back on, which is great. Yeah, I was gonna say it's limiting, but not really, because what Doug did was kind of perfect. So there's no reason to change it. I don't know if it made it easier or harder. I think maybe for me, just as like to have that and sort of always kind of know like in the back of my head, like this is what it looks like. I liked that was like nice to have. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great question.
thank you. Um, so my next question for you is a lot of people, a lot of parents, they tell their kids that they can't read graphic novels because they're not real books. And that's just, I mean, in my opinion, personally, that's just really disheartening. And I know that graphic novels, even just stories with even little illustrations here and there, they really kind of build parts of your mind that you can't get from just prose. So, what would you say to all the people out there who might just think that graphic novels or illustrated stories aren't real stories?
I mean, I think like they're two separate sort of muscles in a way. Sometimes I
Yeah,
think like like when you read a graphic novel, especially like Last Kids is not weird, but like it's sort of in between. 'Cause it's illustrated, um, but there's still still like a lot of prose. Um, when like any reading is reading, and like I think what sort of just have to think about like what the reasons that like we read, if anybody reads, like, and if it's because you had a long day at school and you want to forget about that for a little bit. If you're going to sit down with a graphic novel, that's fantastic, right? Whatever it is, whatever gets you
yeah,
excited, gets you like enjoying that. And if you're someone who loves art and you love your visual, then like that graphic novels are going to like flip a switch inside of you and hit a button that like a traditional like prose novel wouldn't. And at the same time, when you read like a prose novel, your mind, you're feeling, you're creating an image in your brain from from just the words, right? So like if
mhm,
you and I read the same book that's pro, like we would have maybe totally different. We would
yeah,
picture the main character completely different, right? So that's like a different muscle that's also great to exercise. I think they each sort of like exercise. Yeah, they each sort of do different things. And some of them are better for telling certain types of stories. Like graphic novel, like there's certain stuff that like makes way more sense as a graphic novel, and then stuff that like nah, that's kind of more abstract and would probably works better as prose. So I think like they both have their spaces and they sort of fill different buckets or something. Um, and I think what matters is that like you're reading, and that's like someone's reading and enjoying it, and that's like the thing that matters at the end of the day.
yeah, absolutely. So my next question for you is kind of continuing with The Last Kids on Earth, and also The Last Comics on Earth. So they're packed and filled with colorful illustrations, but The Last Comics on Earth specifically is a little bit different of a process than The Last Kids on Earth.
Yeah.
So it's a fully colored illustrated
Yeah.
story, and so you have you as the author, you also have the illustrator, but then you also have a color artist, a person who adds all the color to the story. So how do you feel that that sort of process of kind of having 3 steps in a way of getting your story into motion versus, black and white pictures, how does that kind of differ and make the story better or worse?
Um, it's not so much that the steps change it, like knowing that it's a like a that it's the color. I mean, I don't. I was gonna say the color is an afterthought, but that's not accurate at all. But like, I don't know a lot about color. Like I sort of like kind of know like what I like. I can visualize it, but
Mhm.
the the color sort of goes off and does their thing and makes it look amazing. But but I'm not sort of being like, oh, here's a couple notes on this or not. It's more just like they go and make it fantastic.
Mhm.
But writing it, knowing that it is a fully paneled graphic novel, it's a totally different writing process because it's more like a movie script than it does there's than it does like a regular manuscript or like a prose novel or even like a regular Last Kids book, which is like a hybrid where it's illustrated like we're talking about, but there's also a lot of prose. That still, when I'm writing that, it looks like a regular manuscript for any book, except there are little spaces where it's like a little break where it says illustration, and I
Mhm.
describe I'm kind of picturing the illustration. But Last Comics, it's like sort of like writing movie scripts, so it's very different, and it's a different way of thinking about the storytelling because it's like, okay, wait. when the page turns, you want to see a big image here, or like this is going to be a reveal, and like we don't want to have too many panels on a page, which I'm definitely guilty of a lot. Being like, I'll just cram all this in here. That just makes Jay's job harder and makes the reader's job harder too. So it's a different way of writing and thinking that I feel like I'm still getting used to. Much more like I feel much more comfortable still writing prose, even though writing, I was gonna say it should be easier, but no, it's not easier. But if there's like less words, which is nice. But it's not easier at all. It's just a different way of doing it when you're writing like a comic book panel, comic book type
Yeah.
thing. Um, and I think I feel like there's more back and forth with the illustrator with Jay on Last Comics, because we have to figure out for each new book. It's like, okay, there's a bunch of new bad guys. There's all these new different areas and stuff, and you see a lot more of them than you do in Last Kids. Even if there's a new like setting in a new Last Kids book, Doug probably only has to draw like 5 or 6 times, or depending. So there's less sort of like figuring out exactly the whole ins and outs of it. Than Last Comics, we sort of need to like spend more time thinking about that and talking about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just sort of different. They're different, but both great.
Yeah. So there is something that I wanted to bring up in the Lost Comics on Earth two
Uh-oh.
ones. And no, it's not a bad thing. It's
Oh
not
boy.
a bad thing.
It sounded like I was with my teacher back in. One thing I want to bring up about your report
No, no,
card.
no. It's not in that way, not in that way. So I'm just trying to find it. So on some pages, you actually have, I guess, kind of an address to,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
where you can send like the things on the bottom. So I just want to like find it so I can like read it officially out loud. It's hard. I wish I had like
Yeah,
an
I think we
exact date.
phrased it.
Oh yeah, there
I'll
we
put it
go.
up for
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
So it's mail to Quint Baker, Treehouse next to Joe's Pizza, Apocalyptia, USA. So I mean, there might be kids out there who actually do mail it to that address. So what would
There are.
actually come up if where would it
So
go?
there's one from the first book. It says like mail, and it was like I forget. It was like I forget the cost of the thing, but it said like only said nickels or something. I forget exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And it went to the publisher, and I got in the mail like a whole bunch of pennies and nickels from somebody. I thought it was clear enough that it was a fake joke address. So I think in the second book it's even like we made it even more clear
Yeah.
the phrasing. But doing those fake advertisements for stuff, that's like one of my favorite parts of writing the Last Comics books is like the parody versions of Sea Monkeys
Yeah.
or like back issues for sale, stuff like that. Those are super fun to write.
Yeah. And yeah, it was like only nickels, no dimes, like they hate that.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of nickels. Yeah, from it somehow it made to the publisher. So don't send people. Nobody send it. And enjoy the book.
Yeah.
But don't send stuff because yeah, you don't think you'll get anything, unfortunately.
Yeah. So one subject that I've really been thinking about a lot, and one that's it's kind of always on my mind just as a middle schooler. So it can be really tough nowadays, maybe to kind of keep up with slang because it's just, I mean, even like somebody in the middle school experience, middle grade like life,
Yeah.
just keeping up with like what everybody's saying and all the trends and all that. It's very tiring. So as an author, how do you kind of handle kind of keeping your tone somewhat kid-like, especially from Jack's point of view,
Yeah.
and with cussing and sorry, it's like profanity being used a lot more in middle school. What's your thoughts on that maybe being added to the middle grade space eventually?
Oh boy, these are great questions. These are way better than most questions I ever get. Okay, that's a really good question. So like first of all, in terms of like trying to keep like the sort of like the general voice of Jack, that it way he sort of like talks or things that are like his narrative that's just kind of me. Like I don't mess around with that too much. Like it sort of is what it is. I try not, but what I mean is I try not to like update his like
Yeah.
slang or any of the kids to be like that's what's something kids say right now.
But I don't
Fresh. That's
yeah,
really
fresh,
fresh.
sure, like stuff like that, yeah.
That's a bad one. No, but like, wait, there was a thing. Like Jack's never gonna be like, yo, that's lit. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be weird. Unless he was like looking at a light bulb that was on. but like I'm trying to think. There's like one example in the first book where Jack has to think of like a female celebrity who he would have a crush on, and I think he comes up with, I think it's Selena Gomez, but I'm not sure. I forget. But that like immediately like dated the book a lot because now like she's older now. Like I just think that person would not be that person anymore. Like she's not a singer that Jack would listen to. So like I try to stop. I don't do like those sort of like current references anymore. Which is not like a slang thing, but just in terms of like I try not to do those
Yeah.
like I keep the references stuff that like are like more from me really in a way. Like
Mhm.
it's like Jack seems to have the same pop culture knowledge as this 40-year-old man. That's weird, but whatever. And then it's a good question about like swearing, profanity, and stuff. Like, no, like I wouldn't include it because first of all, then I couldn't. If no one, bookstores, even if I wanted to include it, the publisher wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
But there, yeah, it's like I want the kids to talk and act like real kids, but they still have to do things that they still have to behave like versions of kids that parents want
Yeah.
their kids to be. If that makes any sense. I
Yeah,
mean,
like role
you can't
models.
be. It's like when you watch, even if it's like you watch like um Seinfeld or something. I don't know,
Mhm.
right? And that's a show, and they're about people in their 30s, and they're grown ups, uh, and they live in New York City, but they never swear because they're not allowed to swear on NBC when it was on TV, right? So it's like you sort of like suspend your disbelief a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah, and plus, I don't think, Jack would really be able to keep up with all the trends because there's this zombie apocalypse thing.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah,
That's the other point too. Is that everything would be. I had that issue where it's like everything would be stuck right in
yeah,
like 2016 when the first book came out. But then there's like times where like I want to like reference like a Marvel movie, and I'm like, wait a second, I think that came out in 2018. Like
yeah,
there's like a weird like sort of sliding timeline where it's always like when a new book comes out, like whenever a new book comes out, it's been like probably like about a year and a half in the
mhm,
book timeline since the apocalypse happened, and I always figure that's like 1 year and a half ago. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, they never reference like a recent election or something because that would immediately like yeah mess it up.
yeah, and I did see that, like, for a reference, you did kinda sneak in drip into the story, for, like, clothing.
Oh
I
yeah,
think, like
that's more like making fun. That was that last comics.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, last comics is like a little bit different because I feel like I can make almost like uh be more like jokey with the prose and stuff like jokey with like the language and like
yeah,
make yeah that I feel more comfortable doing within like the last kids uh and also that I think that's like is something where it's like a burst or like a call out on the page, like in an
mhm,
illustration. That's like I know that's like me as opposed to the characters. So
yeah,
that's also different where it's like that's from the it's like that's from like the author. But like in Last Kids, it's like in a regular Last Kids book, like I don't think I would have in dialogue. I would use like drip in dialogue.
yeah.
That's fine. I forgot that I was in that.
Yeah, it just everything flowed really well. You got public domain Dracula. That was probably a highlight in my book.
Wait, for real?
Yeah, public domain Dracula. That was funny.
I'm like, wait, okay, so Josh and I spent like I was like, no one's gonna understand what this is. I don't understand what it is. Like, like the concept of it, yes, but then just like the saying it over and over again. Um, and then there's one line where he's like, public. I think he says, "Public domain, don't eat me." And um, every time whenever the book is finished, it gets reviewed by a copy editor, right? To look for typos and stuff like
Yeah,
that. They also look for stuff that's just like, is this making sense? And it goes through like does it like 7 times. We do it, except every time something gets changed, uh, and every single time they'd be like, "What does this mean? Public domain, don't eat me." And I'd be like, "Josh, they don't like it's confusing everybody again." He's like, "Doesn't matter. Like it's the best thing in the world. We're sticking with it." He's gonna be so happy to hear that you like public domain Dracula.
yeah. And
Great.
it's like you can't say it like you can't have actual Dracula because then you have all that copyright stuff and
Yeah, and he run into trouble. Yeah, so public
yeah,
domain Dracula. Yeah, he's just close enough to real Dracula to be scary, but not close enough to get us sued.
yeah. So the Last Kids on Earth, for all the kids watching, there is its own fan club. And you can join, get some kind of Last Kids on Earth swag.
Mhm.
So that just sounds super awesome as a reader, just being able to join a club with other fans of the same book and just kind of you can connect with them, then you can start talking about the story even more, getting really deep into it. So, how did the fan club begin? And if anybody here is interested, how can you join? And who can
The
join?
the fan club was a couple years ago. I was like, I there was always like I remember fan clubs from when I was a kid, like in the back of books and stuff. Like
Yeah.
they were like physical things. Like I was like member of the Star Wars fan club, and uh,
Mhm.
I just hadn't seen that in forever. And so I started bugging the publisher about like, could we try to do something like this and like actually send real stuff out? Um, and yeah, so we were able to like to do it. And let's see, I've how you, there's a, I think if you just like I always like end up googling up. When I need to see the page. I Google like Last Kids Fan Club. There's like an ad in the back of every book now that has like where to sign up and stuff. And then we used to send out like a ton of free stuff, like physical stuff, but
Mhm.
then there were too many fans. It was became too expensive. So now we still send up we still send out like actual stuff whenever a new book comes out. But I think whenever a new book comes out and whenever you sign up, you get something. So, and then like we just sent out the most recent fan club email, and I wrote a little thing for it, and just like some behind the scene photos and stuff. It's fun to do, and like I love the little card that goes. You get a little card that goes in your wallet. It's cool looking, I like that
Yeah.
stuff.
It's not less comics on Earth too many villains anymore, it's too many fans.
Good. Hey, I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna use that. It's good.
So, my next question for you is something that we're pretty much all wondering as fans of your books. So, you have a lot of stories out, but we're also interested in what stories you have to come. So, are you able to share any sneak peeks of writing projects that are going on? Maybe like a little bit of
Mhm.
just kind of extra information that all of us are kind of dying to know?
So right now I'm working on. Josh and I are about to finish it's tomorrow. I think definitely by Friday, or else I'm in trouble. Last Comics 3 final draft of the manuscript. That'll go to Jay, start drawing, and then we don't have a title yet. We always have titles, and then right now I'm working on Last Kids 10. So that's the follow up to Monster Dimension. Monster Dimension ended like on a big cliffhanger, so it'll be good to be like, here's what happened. Like I feel like I don't like making people wait like that. They ended on a cliffhanger, but I sort of had to because it worked out that way.
Yeah.
So I feel bad like making people wait that long for a cliffhanger. Like I wouldn't like that as a fan. So I feel like I'm being a jerk. I don't need to be. So I'm excited to if, like sort of like finish let people finish that scene and to figure see what happens, and then that book's gonna end with like a big um sort of like we're in like the big final, sort of like right into the big final action. So I'm super excited for people to read book 10, and I'm like halfway done writing it.
Mm.
I'll be done with like a complete first draft in like a month, and another month after that it'll go to Doug to start drawing that, and then we're gonna start working on Last Comics 4 next couple months, and then I'm going right into Last Kids 11 after that. And then there's a couple other things that I can't share. Some are not exciting, so nobody cares that I can't share them. There's one thing that is kind of cool, but I don't know yet, so I'm not gonna say anything, so I don't get
Mm.
in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm doing another book in my book. What's it gonna be? Book number 4? Is it 4? 4 or 5, and I write a series called Mr. Shivers, which is like spooky stories that it's like my favorite thing to write because they're really really short, but they're actually like scary. Um, it's book 5. I think it's book 5. Mr. Shivers. I'm about to start that next week.
All right. So, this is the question that I've asked every single person I've interviewed. If you could be or meet any literary character, so it could be maybe your favorite author of all time, maybe your favorite book character of all time. If you could be them or maybe meet them, whichever one that you prefer, who would it be and why?
Oh, I'm really bad at these questions. Who else have you asked, and what answer have they given?
I've asked people. I cannot remember anything. I think the most popular is like Hermione Granger. Um,
Hmm.
Maybe like second is maybe like Winnie the Pooh. There's a lot
Oh,
of various
wait. Oh,
people.
so wait. Oh, so it's right. Sorry, I was
It
thinking.
could be
Sorry.
like an author or a book character.
Okay. I would okay, this is sort of cheating, but, so I like Frog and Toad,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
and I would like to be, I get one of them, and then just the other one could be a buddy of mine or something, or just be them, be that character, be like I'll be Frog and Toad could just be Toad, and like just live in like a very, and like live like that for a week, and I'll just
Yeah.
like hanging out in the woods and baking cookies and not thinking about like real life for like that would be nice. So I'd be Toad's the grumpier one. Um I'd be Frog and hang out with Toad for a couple weeks.
Yeah, that'd be fun, and, I mean, they have the best quotes about books, I mean, and they're also just like, who doesn't love Frog and Toad?
They're
Best
awesome.
friends. Yeah.
I did not read those books when I was a kid. I only read them like the last year or so, and I was like, these are amazing. Like I immediately got it like that, like the sort of the countryside and like sort of,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, yeah, it's great.
yeah. So, thank you so much for joining me today, Max. Your answers to my questions have been great, and
Your questions were great. Those are seriously very good questions. Like I feel like I usually get not like I'm always being interviewed, but like when I do, it's like often this. There's some very those. There's a couple of those that are good thinkers I've never come before. Thank you.
yeah, I do my best.
You did a good job.
Thanks. So, this is gonna be an interview that I won't soon forget, and I'm sure all of you won't forget as well, because for sure after this interview, you're gonna buy some of Max's books, right? Or get them from your local bookstore, library, wherever books are sold. You're gonna do that, right? It would make Max pretty sad, wouldn't it?
Yes, buy the books.
Yeah. So, everybody, this has been my talk with the one and only author extraordinaire, Max Brallier, and I hope everybody has an amazing day. Keep on reading, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.